Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are studying the prophet Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, chapter 20. This is Saul Weinreb, the host of the podcast, and we just completed chapter 19, and we read about the prophecy of the broken bottle, where Yirmiyahu smashed a bottle in front of a crowd of people in the valley of Gei Ben Hinnom and predicted that just like this bottle will be destroyed, so the people, if they don't change their ways, will be destroyed. And then he came back to the gates of Jerusalem and preached again that God was going to bring destruction upon Jerusalem. So the bottom line is that Yirmiyahu continues to be what is perceived to be by the people as a troublemaker. Everything seems fine. The world is moving along just fine as far as they're concerned. And the false prophets are reassuring everyone, don't worry, just keep bringing your sacrifices, doing your services in the temple. Nothing bad's going to happen. Everything's going to be cool. And this man Yirmiyahu here, who's screaming and yelling, is a troublemaker and just causing trouble. And every time, I pointed out in the last chapter that every time there's some sort of a sign that Yirmiyahu says that he's going to do, it doesn't seem like a very impressive sign. Taking a bottle and smashing it, wearing a belt and letting it get spoiled and rotten and moldy. There's no big miracles, nothing. He's not doing anything to prove to them that he's for real. They're waiting for a big sign, and that sign doesn't come. So the persecution against Yirmiyahu from the people, especially the leaders of the people, is going to take a turn for the worse. As we read the first verse in chapter 20, Vayishma Pashhur ben Imer HaKohen, another Kohen, another priest, whose name was Pashhur, the son of Imer, V'hu Pakid Nagid Beveit Adonai, he was the chief officer in the house of God. He was in charge of the priests. He heard of this prophecy that Yirmiyahu had made. Whether or not he was one that went down to the valley or he heard it in the gates of Jerusalem is irrelevant, but he heard about Yirmiyahu's prophecy. At Yirmiyahu niba et hadvarim ha'ela. He heard that Yirmiyahu, he heard Jeremiah saying these prophecies of doom. And he understood that this was ruining the morale of the people. This was, Pashhur, as we'll see soon, was one of those that was reassuring everyone, just keep bringing your sacrifices to the temple. You don't need to change your ways. You don't need to be better. You don't need to do better. Go ahead and continue the lives the way you have been, and everything will be fine. He was one of those that was saying that. So Yirmiyahu was a lot of trouble for him. So Vayakeh Pashhur. Pashhur then struck, meaning he flogged, whipped at Yirmiyahu HaNavi, Jeremiah the prophet, Vayitein Oso, and he placed him al ha-mahapechet, within the mahapechet. The mahapechet is generally understood to be stocks, or the stockade, where there's two boards and a hole in the middle, and the person's head and arms are put through the hole, and they're secured there, and they can't move. Extremely uncomfortable position, obviously, and extremely humiliating. And so as a punishment, after he was whipped, he was put in the stocks, Asher Bishar ben Yamin, the ones that were located in the gates of Benjamin Ha'elyon, the upper gates, Asher Beveit Adonai, which was in the house of God. So in the temple courtyard, in the gate of Benjamin, there was a stockade, and Yirmiyahu was placed there. Vayihimi Machras, and it came the next day. Vayotse Pashhur et Yirmiyahu min ha-mahapechet, and Pashhur took him out of the stocks and released him. Presumably, he figured that whipping him and putting him overnight in the stocks would be enough to quiet him down and stop him from saying this message. Vayomer elav Yirmiyahu, but Jeremiah said to him, Lo Pashhur kara Adonai shemecha. God has not named you Pashhur. Rather, Ki'im Magor Misaviv. God has named you Magor Misaviv. In other words, you have a name Pashhur that might have been given you by your parents, But that's not the name that God is calling you. God is calling you something else. He's calling you Magor Misaviv. Now the name Pashchor, the word Pash, is like from the word Omed Lafush, to rest. Chor is a language of freedom. So Pashchor would be a rest in freedom, or freedom, rest free, or rest safely, or rest quietly. So his name was a name of peace, and that was his actual name. It was a nice name. However, Jeremiah tells him that you are not, and he indeed was walking around telling the people, Shalom, don't worry, there will be peace, everything will be fine. But Jeremiah tells him, no, your real name is Magor Misaviv. Magor Misaviv means someone around who is surrounded by terror. Magor, terror, is always surrounding this person. Kicho Amar Adonai, because so says God. The prophet continues to tell Pashchor, Hineni nosencha lemagor lecha. I am going to make you as a source of terror. Instead of being a source of peace for people, people are going to look at you and scream and shriek in horror. Not only will you be that way, but so will all of those that are your family, all of those that are your friends. And they will all fall at the swords of their enemies. And your eyes will see the destruction of your family and your friends, Vias Kol Yehuda, and of all Judah falling to the sword. I'm sorry, Viat Kol Yehuda and the rest of Judah, Etain biad melech Bavel. I'm going to place in the hands of the king of Babylon, Vihiglam Bavel, and they will all be exiled to Babylon. Vihikam bacharav, and he will also strike them by sword. So many people will die in the fighting, and the rest will be taken into exile in Babylon. V'notati et kol chosen oirazos, and I will place all of the wealth of the city, v'et kol yigia, and all of the possessions that she worked for, v'et kol yikara, and all of the beautiful value that she has, v'et kol otzrot, and all of the treasures, malchei Yehuda, of the kings of Yehuda that they had accumulated over all of these generations. Attain biad oiveim, I will place them in the hands of their enemies, uvizazum, and they will steal them, take them, ulikachum, vehavim bavela, and they will take them and bring them all the way back to Babylon. The otzrot, the storehouses of the kings of Yehuda, if we recall back in the book of Isaiah, when King Hezekiah showed off to the and bragged to the messengers of the king of Babylon and showed off his treasures. And at the time, Isaiah prophesied and said, because you showed off and you were arrogant and showed off your wealth as if it was yours, this wealth will one day be carried off to Babylon. This is Jeremiah repeating that same prophecy. And he continues and directs his words to Pashchor himself. V'ata Pashchor, and you, Pashchor, v'chol yoshvei veitecha, and all of those that live in your house, telchu bashevi. You're not going to die, but you will be taken captive, ubavel tavo, and you will end up going all the way to Babylon, v'sham tamus, and you will live out the rest of your life in Babylon, away from your country and your homeland. That's where you will die. V'sham tikaver, that's where you will be buried. Hatav v'chol avecha, and that you and all of your friends and family, asher nibeit alem ashakar, all of those people that you gave false prophecies to and claimed that everything was going to be fine and that people didn't need to change and nothing needed to be done, all of you will go to exile there. Now, after Jeremiah says this, and after having experienced this horrific experience of being flogged in public, being locked in the stockade overnight, and knowing that the people wanted to kill him, and knowing that everyone was against him and no one was listening to him, Yirmiyahu now turns towards God, and he says, Pititani Adonai va'epot. God, you have seduced me, and I have become seduced. This is the language of pitui, of mefateh, is the same language that's used when someone seduces, and it has a sexual connotation, of a woman who was seduced into doing something that she ended up regretting and she did not want to do, and she now regrets and says that I have been seduced. Yirmiyahu is looking towards God and saying, God, you convinced me, you got me into this mess, and I let you get away with it. Chazaktani vatuchol. You have become more, you are stronger than me, and you are able. This is a reference back in chapter 1 when Yirmiyahu said, God, I'm just a young boy. I don't have, how could I do this? Don't send me on this message. And God, you said, no, you'll do it. You beat me. You convinced me. You got me into this mess. And now, where am I? Hayisi lischok kol hayom. I am someone who everyone is constantly, all day, people just making fun of me. Kulo lo egli. Everyone is constantly poking fun, jeering at me, laughing at me. This is what I have become. This is me now. God, you got me here. You convinced me. And look at where I am. Ki midei adaber ezok. This is verse 8. Every single time I even begin to speak, I have to cry out. What do I have to cry out? I have to cry out the message you tell me, the message you put in my heart, which is Chamas Vashod. This is full of violence and injustice, Ekra. That's all I call out. I'm constantly yelling at everyone. There's violence, there's injustice. But now the word of God has become to me a source of shame, a source of disgrace, a source of constant hatred and contempt. This is what happened to me. So I told myself, I'm not going to say it anymore. I'm done. All it does is bring me trouble. No longer will I speak in God's name. But the problem is I can't stop myself. These words are in my heart like a burning flame. It is closed up within my bones. It's in my deepest depths of my heart, soul, and body. I am exhausted from trying to hold back. It is too hard for me to keep from doing it. Kalkel is to withstand, to hold back. I'm exhausted from trying to hold these words back. I need to tell the people this message. The truth is in his heart. He knows that the people need to change. He knows that destruction is coming. So as a human being, he has to speak. He has to speak. But I don't want to speak, because all it does whenever I speak is bring more shame upon myself, bring more suffering, bring more torture. And I'm just too exhausted, and I just can't stop myself from telling the people this message that I have to tell them. Kishamati, and I've heard, and all I do, I hear the dibat rabim, the words that people are speaking about me in the streets. Magor misaviv. I hear all these words around me as a magor misaviv. This is the same term as he said that when to Pashhor, he said, your real name is magor misaviv, a person who is surrounded by terror. Now I am this magor misaviv. I am surrounded by terror. That's one way of understanding this magor misaviv. I hear people talking to me, and around me I have become a source of terror. Everyone looks at me, and that's all I am, is just talking about terror, talking about evil, talking about bad. And everything just constantly causing suffering. Another way to understand this, the Malbim actually understands that this is a reference to Pashhor, and this is his actual name. Then you would read this verse differently. You would say, Kishamati dibas rabim magor misaviv. I have heard the words that the people are saying, which are the words of Magor Misaviv, the person who I named. Terror surrounds him, because all of those people, him in charge of them, are saying terrible things about me. A third way to understand this is Magor Misaviv. I have heard the words Kishamati dibat rabim. I've heard the words of all these people, Magor misaviv, which causes all of this terror that surrounds me. Hagidu v'nagidenu. What are these people saying? I'm continuing in the middle of verse 10. What are they saying all the time? They are saying, let us talk about him, v'nagidenu, and maybe we will be able, and let us inform about him. Let us talk about him. Let us say, let's say bad things about him. Call enosh shlomi, all of those people who used to be my friends, who I thought were my friends, shomerei tzal'i, those are all now waiting for me to stumble, waiting for me to trip. Ulai yifuteh, they're hoping that maybe we can convince him, v'nuchlalo, and then we'll be able to to conquer him, to beat him. What does this mean? That maybe we will convince him. There's two ways of understanding this. One way, the Radak says, what they're saying is, maybe if we keep talking about him and we keep saying bad things, maybe we'll convince him to join us and stop this nonsense. And if he joins us, then we can beat him, because then we don't have to worry about listening to anymore. Another way of understanding is, like the Radak says, maybe we'll convince him to join us, and then we can feed him some poison, and then we can take revenge against him, because he's driving us so crazy. Another way of understanding this, Rabbi Yosef Kara explains this by saying, maybe we can entrap him into saying something. If we keep on bothering him, maybe we can entrap him into saying something that would be considered treasonous, and then we can hand him over to the king and have him killed and get rid of him. So he continues to speak, V'Adonai osi ki gibor aritz, and God, to me, you are. Here you have the prophet goes back and forth between this terrible feeling of despair, this complaining to God about the suffering that he's going through. And then he says, but God, you are to me like a powerful, strong, mighty warrior. Another way of understanding this is, God, you have made me like a powerful warrior. So either he's saying that this is how God appears to him, or that God has given him the strength to be a powerful warrior. Al Kain, therefore, Rodfai Yikashlu. This could be looked at as a prayer, or looked at as him speaking the future. Those that are chasing after me will trip, will stumble, v'lo yuchalu, and they will not be able to overtake me, because I know you, God, have promised me that you're going to stand by me. Boshu ma'od kilo eskilu. I know they will be embarrassed, for they will not be successful. Kilimat olam lo tikasheach. With the type of embarrassment and shame that they're going to experience is one that will last forever, and it will never be forgotten in history. Hence we are reading about it today. V'Adonai Tzivaot, and God, the Lord of hosts, bochein tzaddik. He is just, and he knows. Bochein could mean to test, meaning that he understands and knows the inner souls of the righteous, or bochein could be God tests the righteous. And I know that I am righteous. I know that I am with God, Yirmiyahu is saying, right? And he is the one who's testing me. Ro'ech lo yos v'lev. He sees in my insides. He knows my thoughts. He knows what's in my heart. Erenik mascha mehem. And therefore I know that I will see my revenge against these people. Ki elecha gilisi esrivi. Because I have given my argument over to you. I am not trying to take revenge myself, but rather I am giving that over to you, God. I'm asking you, God, to take that revenge for me. I am not fighting back physically myself. He then turns in verse 13 to the people that surround him, the few faithful that actually did follow Yirmiyahu, and says, Shiru l'Adonai, sing to God. Hallelujah, Adonai, praise God. Why? Ki hitzil et nefesh evyon miyad mireim, because he has saved the soul of the poor one from the hands of those that are doing evil to him. Now this could be a reference to the fact that he was released from the stockade, so at least momentarily he was saved. He's still alive, he's still moving, he wasn't left there to die. This also could be a vision of the future where he's feeling confident, knowing that God will be with him, and he's saying, sing to God because I am confident, because I know that this will happen in the future. Ultimately, this justice will come. Or it could be that what he's saying here is that I know that I'm suffering, but hitzilet nefesh avyon, God, you saved me from being one of those bad people. Even though I'm suffering, and even though I've been ashamed, and even though I've been tortured, even though I've been locked up, however, I'm still happier being on the side of good than being among the Mireim, being among the evil. I'm still rather be suffering here and be on the right side than be having everything okay and be there with the bad guys, with the evil ones. Now Yirmiyahu goes, as the moods go up and down, we find this bouncing back and forth so much in this chapter. In the next few verses, Yirmiyahu becomes bitter again, and he looks at his lot and looks what he had just went through. And he looks down the pipe and he knows God's going to give him a mission again soon. He's going to have to go out again and preach this message of doom again. and he's not going to convince the people, and he's going to suffer again and even more. And now he sees and he feels like this is all futile. And he says, Arur Hayom, cursed is the day Asher Yuladati Bo, the day that I was born. Yom Asher Yulodatni Imi, the day upon which my mother gave birth to me. Al Yihi Baruch, should not be a blessed day. My birthday was not a happy day. It was better that I not be born. Arur Ha'ish, and cursed is that man, Asher Bisaret Avi, Lemar, who came to my father and said the news, Yulad l'cha bein zachor, you've had a male child, you've had a boy. Sameach simachu, and he gave me, my father was so happy when he heard that I was born, that a son is born. Cursed is that man that brought the news. Now, why is it that you're cursing the man that brought the news? What did he do wrong? All he did was bring the news. So there's several traditions. The simple understanding is that obviously he doesn't mean to curse the man. He's just obviously in an extremely distraught and upset mood at this time. However, there's several traditions. The Radak brings the rabbinic tradition that the man who brought the news was Pashhur, was the guy who stuck him in the stockade. He was the one that brought the news, and therefore Jeremiah is cursing him because he was an evil man. There's no clear reference to that in the text, but that is just a tradition. Another tradition that is brought by the Malbim, and that is that there's a tradition that Menashe, who was an evil king, who was the king at the time that Yirmiyahu was born as a baby, Menashe did not want any more. He knew that this boy that was going to be born was going to be a holy man and a prophet, and Menashe, being evil, did not want the prophet to be born, and he hired a man he appointed a man to give the mother an abortive fashion, to cause her to abort the baby so he's not born, and the man didn't do it, and instead the man brought the news of the birth of a healthy boy. This is just another tradition, a midrashic tradition, but then he's saying, cursed is that man, not that he's cursing the man that he did something wrong, but cursed is he because that man was cursed because Menashe ended up executing him for not fulfilling his mission. Now, I know that sounds a little dramatic, and it's certainly not in the text, but it's just another way of trying to understand why Jeremiah would curse the man who brought the news. V'haya ha'ishahu, and that man who brought the news should be ke'arim asher hafach Adonai v'lo nicham, just like the cities that God overturned and destroyed, and God would never change his mind. He would unrelenting destruction he placed upon those evil cities. This is kind of reminiscent a little bit of Sodom and Gomorrah that were overturned with unrelenting might. V'shoma ze'akah b'boker, and that he should hear screaming in the morning, utrua, and sounds of noise of battle baits harayim in the afternoon, because usually wars are fought during the daytime, not in the nighttime. So that person that brought the news of my birth should just suffer, because my birth was not something to be happy about. Asher lo mosasni meirachem, that why did he, and he here would mean God, why didn't he just let me die in my mother's womb and be a miscarriage? Vatihili imi kivri, let my mother's body be where I get buried and my life end. V'rachma harat olam, and my mother's womb could be the place where I ended my entire life. This is just saying, like, here I am in this horrific situation, that who would ever want to be in this situation? It would have been better had I not been born. Why is it that I was even born? Why did I leave my mother's womb? Just so that I should see suffering and misery, just so that I should see this torture. And my days should end in shame and embarrassment and ridicule. Is this why I was born? I know, I'm sorry that this chapter ends on such an awful and sad note, but this is the end of chapter 20. Thank you for studying chapter 20 with me. Looking forward to studying Jeremiah 21 together as well.